The organisation Undoing Tax Abuse, that's OUTA, has filed legal papers over the energy regulator NERSA's Karpowership's licences. In September last year, NERSA approved 3 generation licences for floating power provider Karpowership SA. But Karpowership is still waiting for other authorisation before its 3 ships at Saldanha Bay, Guga and Richards Bay ports can connect to the grid. For more on this, we're joined by OUTA's legal head, Advocate Stephanie Fick. Advocate, always good to have you on Newzroom Afrika. So you say this is unreasonable, procedurally unfair. Break that down for us.
This is a review application, and what we are basically saying is that NERSA came to an irrational decision when they gave generation licenses to the Karpowership IPPs. There's a lot of information out there, and we believe that if they considered all the facts, they would have come to a different conclusion. So unfortunately, we will have to go to court now to ask the court to intervene and set aside that decision to grant them the generation license.
You've also gone further and accused NERSA of not acting in the best interests of the country. That is quite a charge for a national energy regulator. How do you arrive at that conclusion?
Yes, it's part of this, not taking into account not taking into account relevant evidence and facts and not applying their minds. And let's start off by saying, firstly, Karpowerships, that technology is normally used, hasn't been used for 20 years like in South Africa's case. It's normally a temporary solution. It is an emergency solution. In other words, it's where there's, for example, disaster in a country. They will come in, supply some electricity, and then go away. South Africa is sort of the first example where these ships will be at our shores for 20 years. We also believe that NERSA did not consider the cost to the country. We are talking about a deal of more than 200 billion rand. And what is so tragic, and why we say that, NERSA couldn't have done, done the sums and then come to the conclusion that this is reasonable. Because the price for gas is directly linked to US dollar price, and then the exchange rate between the US dollar and rand exchange rate. So what that means is we do not know what gas is going to cost us in 2 years, in 5 years' time. In fact, the experts in the field say that gas is only going to become more expensive. And who is going to pay for that? Us, the consumers of electricity. And, although there's so many other things, I think, let me just also highlight this point, is that Karpowership is not a play and plug option. In other words, they're not going to come to our shores and all of a sudden load shedding is history. There is a process. So even if everything goes according to plan, they get all the authorizations, all their boxes are ticked. This will take probably a year to 2 years for them to actually start supplying electricity. And there are other more cost-effective means of trying to get South Africa from underneath, load shedding and the burden of actually sitting in the dark.
What then, Advocate, are those other means that could work faster? Because that's what South African households and businesses want to see. And as things stand, there's been nothing new added to the grid. Where is the solar, for example?
Exactly. I think what government needs to do ASAP, and instead of trying to push this deal through, that's really, it just does not make sense at all, is to start making the regulatory environment easier for your alternative energy providers, to make it possible for them to become part of the grid. Now, I can't sit here and say that I'm a fan of this or I'm a fan of this. It should be solar, it should be wind. If you ask me, and I'm not a specialist, I think it should be a combination. But what I am sort of advocating for is, the minister made available 2,000 megawatts in terms of the risk mitigation independent power producer program, a lot of P's, and made that available for people to tender. And I think that there are so many other sources of energy that will alleviate the crisis that Eskom is in. Eskom's problem is not going to be resolved soon.
So proponents of the Karpowerships deal and potential power supply say this is a company that has tried to do business with South Africa basically and tried to do it honestly to help plug a massive energy hole and is, to paraphrase, being picked on. How do you respond?
I wanted to say, shame. No, it is about what does common sense say? I actually wanted to say. You know, they want to do good, but not for 20 years. This is really, if you weigh up the balance, you know, they want to do business and they want to do good. Yes, if they want to do good, excellent, give us it for free. But they want to do good. But if you then balance that with the interests of South Africans and all power, you know, all electricity end users, you know, we can't have this deal because it benefits the Karpowerships. It should be in the best interest of each and every South African. And looking at the facts and looking at the evidence, and there I include the evidence, for example, the environmental authorizations, which they haven't gotten because you know, the department has said no. And it's only now on appeal. And maybe also, let me take this back a bit. They originally asked for exemption in terms of NEMA, in other words, the National Environmental Management Act. And that was set aside because they got it on faulty information, on not the right facts. Then they applied for the authorization and they didn't get it. Now it's on appeal. So, you know, environmentally it is a problem. Financially it's a problem. They haven't gotten their licenses for gas distribution. In fact, I think the public participation is ongoing today. And then the fact that they need to sit in our ports and all of that. There's so many authorizations and licenses that's still outstanding that, you know, to come back. Where's the balance at? And I believe that, you know, the majority of South Africans will say, please, the deal should be in our best interest. And what we are saying is, objectively looking at the facts, the deal is not.
And while I have you here speaking to us about issues related to power supply in South Africa, I don't imagine you read the whole thing, but the fourth part of the State Capture Commission report is out. One of the aspects grabbing headlines today has to do with the recommendation that former executives Matsela Koko and Anoj Singh face a criminal investigation or possible criminal prosecution as relates to Optimum Coal Mine. OUTA has spoken a lot about alleged state capture in that space. Your reaction?
I just think it's a tragedy that, you know, this is not the first time we hear the names. I mean, this is not a surprise. I think the Zondo Commission report puts a stamp of, you know, vindication to organizations like OUTA, but so many other civil activist organizations, to journalists, to, you know, to this station, by, you know, keep on reporting on these type of matters. So it's not surprising, but what is a surprise is that we haven't seen anybody held to accountable. Eskom, the fact that we are sitting in the dark is directly linked to this time period where the looting was rampant. I think what is also standing out from this report is I think for the first time, you know, the report came right out and said that former President Zuma was responsible, making sure that certain people are put into place, and that, you know, for example, the ruling parties should hang their head in shame because Eskom was not governed by government or anybody else. It was governed by the Guptas. They took over Eskom, and we lost an enormous amount of money to just sheer corruption.
Just as you mentioned, the Guptas, perhaps worth reading one of the quotes here. It says, the evidence proves a scheme by the Guptas to capture Eskom, install the Gupta selected officials in strategic positions within Eskom as members of the board, the committees of the board, and the executives, and then divert Eskom's assets to the Guptas' financial advantage. Can any of the damage from the state capture years, in fact, can the large part of the damage caused by the state capture years, which some say are continuing, can it ever be undone?
Well, if we stop believing that, we can just as well throw in the towel. So I do believe that once, you know, there's a lot of things that I believe should happen. I mean, we've been asking this question, when are people going to be in orange? overalls. When are we going to see the NPA starting to arrest, the police arrest and the National Prosecuting Authority prosecute? Yes, it's a very important issue, and hopefully people will be held to account because they belong behind bars if they are found guilty. But what we also need to look at is ethical leadership. In other words, ethical leadership in our SOEs, like Eskom, managing the SOE not on behalf of a family or a political party or anybody else, except for in the best interest of South Africa. We need ethical leadership in order to hold to account the people that should not be in positions. Because what we're still seeing is, for example, Mosebezi Zwane, it was quite clear that this former minister was put into the position of Minister of Mineral Resources, and they got rid of a very good minister, and please excuse, I think I'm going to pronounce his surname incorrectly, but Ramatlodi, who did great in that department, but he was removed because he was not willing to dance to the tune of the Guptas. So we need good, strong people in leadership positions to take us into a new era, to create a better South Africa for all. And you know what? What this is showing more and more and more. I was just looking at, for example, McKinsey. One of the companies that was involved in state capture paid back 1.1 billion. You know how much money that is and what we could have done with that? KwaZulu-Natal is struggling due to a disaster, but also corruption, because the infrastructure just could not handle this disaster. So the amount of money that's lost to corruption means that we cannot spend the money in the areas we need it most. And that includes health, education for our kids. Can we please build schools so that our children do not have to walk miles in order to get a proper education? Can we not start building up our local governments so that everybody can get services?
Advocate Stephanie Fick from the organization Undoing Tax Abuse, thank you very much for your time. And the advocate mentioned there former President Jacob Zuma and the findings in this latest part of the state capture report.